Hello and welcome. This is Ameco and you're watching our daily updates live from Bahar Dar, Ethiopia. I am Gaila Damu. Stay tuned. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and First Lady Zinash Tayacho has embarked on a 2-day state visit to Kenya, where they were welcomed by President William Ruto at Jomo Kenyatta Airport. According to Office of the Prime Minister, that subsequently President William Ruto guided the Prime Minister on a tour of an ICT park in Nairobi, highlighting the participation of youth in artificial intelligence technology. The wise leadership and mobilization of Emperor Minlik play a pivotal role for the realization of Adwa victory. The speech taken from Prime Minister Abiy and historian Jonas Raymond substantiates such a claim. Modom Muliye compiled the story.
17th August 1844 was born Menelik II, the great emperor of Ethiopia, from 1889 to 1913. It was under the reign of Emperor Menelik II that the process of territorial expansion and the creation of the modern empire state of Ethiopia was completed, and the major signposts of modernization were introduced into the country. One of the most outstanding historical records during the reign of Emperor Menelik II was Ethiopia's triumphant victory over Italian invading forces at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. Historians and scholars say the Ethio-Italian confrontation at the Battle of Adwa was like the David and Goliath story, the story in which the heavily armed giant warrior Goliath is hit and killed by David, armed only with a sling and stones. Because it was a fierce fight for freedom of Ethiopian traditional warriors, farmers and women against a well-armed and organized Italian army in which Ethiopia came up victorious by defeating a white colonial army for the first time in the world's political history. And one of the factors that made this victory become a reality was the successful and decisive leadership role of Emperor Menelik II.
አባቶቻችን በምን መነቃቀፍ በምን ደግሞ መደጋገፍ እንዳለባቸው እንዲሁ ያውቃሉ።
Our forefathers have taught us when to unite and when to separate. Leaders of the Battle of Adwa, the soldiers, farmers and the rest of the people played the backbone of roles in the victory of Adwa. They all came together for a national purpose, putting their differences aside.
አባቶቻችን በሀገርና በመንግስት መካከል ያለውን ልዩነት ጠንቅቀው ያውቃሉ።
Especially Emperor Minlik II and his wife Empress Daitu wisely coordinated and led the entire Ethiopian army. They also won external support through their successful leadership and diplomatic skills. That is what we their sons and daughters learn from the victory of Adwa.
ሀገርና መንግስትን መለየት ማለት እንዲህ ነው።
The American professor Raymond Jonas has written a book entitled The Battle of Adwa, African Victory in the Age of Empire. In his book, the writer mentions the wise leadership and mobilization of the emperor as a key factor enabling Ethiopia to do the seemingly unthinkable and impossible during the time.
So the Battle of Adwa took place in the Ethiopian highlands on the 1st of March, 1896. And it was a confrontation between an Italian army and an Ethiopian army that resulted in a triumphal victory for Ethiopia and disastrous defeat for Italy. The emperor, the Ethiopian emperor, a man named Menelik, he has to overcome some internal challenges. There are others who want to topple him just as he tried to topple his predecessor. But he's a brilliant strategist, and it's part of the story is just to see how he makes the most of the limited resources he has in order to bring down a formidable opponent.
Today, for Ethiopians, Adwa victory remains a common symbol of leadership wisdom, national unity and togetherness, even at testing times. It is celebrated annually on 23rd February as in the Ethiopian calendar. The government of Ethiopia has given the Adwa Victory Day a due attention in order to pass it on to the coming generations as a common ground of national interest and purpose. That's why a modern memorial museum is built at the center of the capital, Addis Ababa.
Historian underscored pinnacle leadership skill is the quality which enabled Emperor Menelik to score victory over Italy during the War of Adwa. Ababa Brhani has more on it.
In an exclusive interview with Amhara Media Corporation, Professor of History Shumet Sishany stated that timing, generosity and participatory leadership skill were the greatest qualities of Emperor Menelik for scoring victory over Italy at the Battle of Adwa. As to the explanation of Professor Shumet, Emperor Menelik was very wise in identifying the right time for the War of Adwa.
Let's consider what the situation was like in Ethiopia 5-6 years before the Battle of Adwa. This was the time of the Great Famine in Ethiopia. Had Menelik rushed to that war before the time, he would most certainly have lost, because the country was ravaged by a cattle disease and terrible famine. So it would have been nearly impossible to mobilize that many troops and to be able to get the resources to support these troops. So Menelik understood the importance of waiting. He knew that he needs arms. He knew that a lot of diplomatic works would have to be performed, and he knew that he had to cement alliances with his own subordinates. So time was essential, and Menelik waited because the situation required waiting. Menelik was extremely patient. He understood the value of waiting. He understood the importance of timing. So he waited for the perfect time.
Professor Shumet explained that the kindness and generosity of Emperor Menelik helped him to get many followers, including his enemies, so that he became successful in fighting against Italian troops.
Menelik was truly kind and generous. He does not engage in overkill. Many of those who fought with him at Adwa were once upon a time his enemies, whom he had captured at the battlefield, some of whom were wounded, but they saw how Menelik treated them. He never engaged in overkill. So there were various methods that were employed to persuade the contending parties to surrender before the fight. Generous treatments were offered. All of this with the design of minimizing the ravages of war. More than any leader that I remember, Menelik was the one who was extremely careful to minimize the inevitable ravages of war.
Professor Shumet added that Menelik was a great cultivator of talent. This situation enabled him to get many heroes and war leaders who played a decisive role in the War of Adwa.
Menelik was also a great cultivator of talent. Many of those that fought that laid at the Battle of Adwa were very ordinary young men that Menelik had cultivated, that Menelik had brought up. Menelik cultivated talent. He appreciated merit. It's not who these people were born from, it was what these people were capable of doing. So people like Balcha, Hafta Georgis, and all of those who did great and splendid heroism at the Battle of Adwa were ordinary people, ordinary young men that Menelik had cultivated. He saw their talent and he opened the avenue for them.
The professor elaborated that Emperor Menelik was participatory in his leadership. This participatory leadership gave a chance for other leaders, including Empress Aitu, to use their skill freely during the war.
Menelik allowed people with skill to flourish. They were free and they were independent. Menelik was not a controlling personality. Menelik was not an angry man. People did not look behind them as to what to do. They knew that Menelik would allow them. So many of the generals that performed those heroic exploits at the Battle of Adwa felt free and operated with that sense of freedom and dedication and commitment. Not many of the Ethiopian aristocracy or kings would have allowed their wives to exercise that kind of power and that kind of authority. Aitu was free to use her talent in public.
You're watching Amhara Media Corporation English Service, and now let's proceed to News Beyond Borders. For a second straight week, biopic Bob Marley One Love continues to exceed expectations by claiming the #1 spot at the box office, overcoming 2 debut films and Sony's Madam Web that's still producing subpar numbers. The Paramount film starring Kingsley Ben-Adir pulled in $13.5 million during its second week of release. The project, which was produced for about $70 million, already eclipsed that mark, grossing nearly $72 million domestically in North America. It's an impressive achievement for the Reynaldo Marquez Green-directed Marley's musical biopic that's focused on the Rastafarian legend's story during the making of his 1977 album Exodus, while leading up to his impactful concert in his native Jamaica. Senior media analyst for data firm Comscore Poll said that some of his greatest hits came out nearly 50 years ago, but his music still resonates through this film. One Love drew nearly $2 million more than Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba to the Hashira training, which placed #2. The latest installment in the Japanese anime series from Crunchyroll and Sony debuted with $11.7 million, as African News reported it. President Macky Sall's initiative to convene a dialogue in Dakar has culminated in significant developments for Senegal's political landscape. The conclusion of the dialogue on Tuesday revealed 2 crucial outcomes that are said to shape the nation's electoral future. The first focal point of discussion revolved around the electoral process. Participants deliberated on the status of candidates, particularly distinguishing between those whose candidacies were upheld by the Constitutional Council and those deemed as spoiled candidates. The second major deliberation centered on determining the election date. After careful consideration and dialogue, consensus emerged around setting June 2nd as the date for the presidential election. President Sall, emphasizing the importance of concluding the electoral process before the onset of the rainy season in June, had set the stage for this decision at the beginning of the dialogue. The outcome of this pivotal dialogue is anticipated to pave the way for a transparent and inclusive electoral process, reinforcing Senegal's commitment to democratic principles, as African News reported it. That's all we have for now. I am Gaila Damu. Thanks for watching and stay tuned with the rest of our programs.